Welcome back, everybody. Another very special episode of the Canary Room in the company of this gentleman here, Mr. Richard Knowles.
Thank you.
Here he is. Today, well, what have we got in store? Quite possibly one of the most special things we've ever done on the show, and that's because in our company today is a man who is not content with just breeding birds for the show bench, but with a number of pals. This man is responsible for the recreation of a bird which was extinct. Of course, talking about the London Fancy. So we're going to spend some time with Richard in his incredible surroundings, talking all things London Fancy. So as always, grab yourself a cuppa, sit back, and enjoy the show. So, Richard, our intro as a man who has achieved an awful lot. You've kept an awful lot of different variety of birds over the years. Mm-hmm. So come on, I'm fascinated by the story behind this. Why recreate the London Fancy?
Well, first of all, obviously I've been breeding birds for nearly 60 years, but about five years ago, Andy Cooper, who I used to travel with to all the Fife shows, we've seen you many times at most of the big shows, decided to breed Labradors. So he gave up, and because of my incapacity with my right leg, I'm not keen on vast distances driving anymore. And so that was really a bit of a point where I thought, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. I can't see myself getting up at 6 a.m. and driving off to the Midland show or north of England or whatever on my own. So I thought, I need a new challenge. And this is a challenge that's been in my head most of my life. As a small boy at the local CBS, I asked questions about the London, and guys in the club in those days said they never really existed. They were always Flemish weavers who dyed their birds as unflighted birds, and they molted out to leave black wings and tail. Couldn't believe that's actually the truth, because there's people that I knew of, including Cyril Rogers, who was the last secretary of the London Club in the 1920s. I knew him personally, so I couldn't believe that he would dye birds. He was a genuine man. And the last London Fancy Club secretary was in Regent Street in Cambridge. So it's a connection that had always been. So at that point I thought, I need a new challenge, and I knew that Pete Renders in Belgium had bred some birds that changed colour from cells to look more like the old London. So I approached him and brought some birds over. They looked like green fifes, and I wasn't impressed because they were a lot of money. And I text the guy, Pete Renders, and said I was hoping that there might be some semblance of a London canary amongst these, given what the birds cost. And he assured me that something would come from them if I worked with them, paired them correctly, and sure enough, over a period of time, the odd bird or two came out with drizzled feathers or light patches. Then over the years they've improved, and you can see now that we've moved on to a different level. There's so much. It's not just pairing a light bird to a light bird, and I'll show you that in a minute.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really pleased, but I'm happy to say today, I can say on camera, having spoken to Andy Cooper, that next year Andy and I will be showing Fifes in a partnership again.
Oh, fantastic. Well, listen, Andy's an absolute legend, as you are, Richard, so that's good news for the Fife Fancy. But I think what we're seeing here is, you're telling me this is sort of 5 years of your work.
Oh yeah.
But the progress is incredible. So let's have a little look at a couple of them, and then we'll have a little chat about the pairing and the malting out, because that fascinates me. They start as a self.
Yeah.
More of that in a second.
Yeah.
So, Richard, in front of us, we've got, I'm just counting the cages, 8. I don't need all my fingers of that. We've got 8 cages.
Yep.
We've got a variety of different London fancies in these cages.
Yep.
We've got your best London fancy at Stafford up in the top left there. That's a beautiful fawn bird.
Yep.
And then we've got a variety of sort of, obviously you've got yellow and buff, but we've got different markings on them. And so you think about the London fancy as kind of the classic, you called it a kind of clear-bodied bird with dark tail and dark wings. But you were saying before you wouldn't pair 2 classics together.
Absolutely not. No. A lot of people think what I want is a pair of London fancies, which would be what we call a jonk or a yellow, and a mealy, which we know is a buff.
Yeah.
And pair them together, and that would be a perfect pair of London fancies. Well, it would not, because what that tends to do is breed birds with white tail feathers, white wing feathers, light legs, where they should have dark legs, dark feet, a dark beak. So we need to pair a spangleback, which is like this, not this one, because this is a cock as well, but this is a spangleback. Now that would be paired to a clear-bodied bird, and that will give you a greater chance of having clear-bodied birds. But the thing we need to get over is the fact that the birds improve year upon year, and this bird is a son of one of these 2 yellow cocks. I'd need to look in my breeding records to tell you which one. But both these clear-bodied birds looked like this last year. So on their second annual molt, they're much, much clearer. The fawn bird on the end is the exception, because that's only 1 year old. It's only 6 months old. And the other thing that most people don't realise when they look at the London fancy is this is not how they come out of the nest. They come out of the nest, the good ones come out of the nest as self birds. And in fact, if they're not a self bird, there's a fair chance that they'll be leaving at the earliest opportunity because they are not going to be a classic London fancy in any way, or even a spangleback. This small fawn here is probably a sibling of the above bird, but it hasn't completely molted. Well, it's completely molted, but it's not molted out as a clear-bodied bird.
Yeah.
But that isn't to say that next year, on its second molt, that it won't do that, because it probably will. We're all still learning. We're all still learning, because nobody's got a format that says this is exactly how this works. So we're learning as we go along, but certainly we're making progress.
Yeah. I mean, the concept of that, isn't it? I mean, we talk a lot about the fancy, about the patience that's required. And, if you're building any stud of birds, there is a real patience required to building that stud of birds. But to kind of almost have a bird that, you wait until it's at its second annual molt. We talked before about, generally speaking, certainly with the smaller type canaries, they're a 1 year show bird, and then they go a bit longer and they're not good for the bench. But these, like a fine wine, these get better with age. Yeah,
absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, that's not to say that a classic bird is better than a spangleback. This bird was second best London at Stafford this year, because we don't just judge for the classic, because this is a version of a London fancy, which is essential, because without spanglebacks we'd have birds with light tail feathers, light wing feathers. So we need that darker element in the bird. This is why we know that some of the other guys are still using lizards in their birds. to bring the darkness back into it, you'll notice I don't have a lizard in the shed.
No.
So I use my own dark birds back to my own light birds. And that's it. The objective for me is to expand the number of people who are breeding these birds, because I see it as the biggest challenge of all. And I want to see 150 of these at a show. That's what I want to see. There's many people who ask me for birds, but these are people who want a pair of birds to say, I've got a pair of Londons, but I want people who are going to exhibit them.
Yeah.
And as I told you, Stuart Fox is having 2 pairs in a couple of weeks, and he's another new one. There's many people who want them, but we're trying to get to the real canary men.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's important, isn't it? They're not a bird that says, just come and pick me to. It's not about a collection. It's not about having them on the wall. It's about how do we develop the fancy, because it's still very much in its infancy.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd say it's growing. There's a lot of interest in it. In fact, there's far more people than there are available stock. But we will get there, and as I say, I'm hoping to have a good breeding season again and get a few more people going.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Fabulous stuff. So we were chatting, Richard, about the birds, and I noted the consistency of type, but actually type for a London fancy is not the key component element now.
Not relevant in terms of shape or size. The important factors are obviously for a classic to be clear-bodied, a classic rather. A yellow bird, which is the genuine classic, is black tail, black wings, dark legs, feet and beak, and that's where all your points are. There's no points for the size of the bird or roundness of the bird or anything like any other type canary. That way we all know exactly what they're trying to do, and it's open to interpretation, whereas I think the London is not really open to interpretation, because it either fits the criteria or it doesn't.
Yeah, so it's black and white or black and yellow.
Indeed. Yeah.
So we've got some sort of pairs up here. The first pair we've got is you talk us through the pairs, and these are pairs that
I'm likely to pair together. Yeah. I haven't actually worked my pairings out, but this is the type of bird that I would look for each partner, as it were. So what we have is the little fawn hen, the one at Stafford, which is a yellow feathered bird, and it's being paired to a buff feathered bird, which is a saddleback. Hopefully, now you can see the fault in the saddleback, because it's got light feathers in the tail. That's my fault, learning from what to pair together last year. So although it's not a perfect bird, it's probably as close to perfect that I've got for this hen.
Yeah.
So we've got in the old terms, buff or mealy as they were called in the London days, to a white feathered bird, a white bird which is yellow feathered. So that pair should throw me more birds that will be self, hopefully, and they'll come out with the dark feathers and tail.
So second pair we've got here then
is virtually the other way round. Again we've got a yellow feathered fawn and white variegated, but it's yellow feathered. It's a little hen, but it's a dark bird, so it's a saddleback, but more than a saddleback. It's rather darker than I'd like it to be. But to pair that, I'd use virtually a classic, a clear-bodied bird, dark feet, dark legs, dark beak, and almost a clear body. Again, that's doing the reverse again, keeping the darkness within the bird, because if you don't have that darkness, you've got light feathers appearing on clear-bodied birds, and they're never going to win.
No. And then the third pair that we've got up here is
a classic cock.
Yeah.
Nice bird, probably the best I've got in the classic description, and that's with a saddleback hen Spangleback hen. Again, carrying all the dark features again. And so the important point is you don't get two classic birds and pair to each other, because that's unfortunately a road to disaster. We're all still learning. I'm still making mistakes, but I'm hoping to make less mistakes as I go along. I'm learning not what to do, and I have to thank Andy Early and Joe Coakley to some extent, because the advice they've given me, and we're all learning from each other, and we exchange birds between us to help each other out, which is a lovely aspect of the London Fancy, because all we're all trying to do is expand the amount of birds and the amount of birds exhibited.
Yeah.
The fourth pair is the reverse again. It's a clear-bodied, mealy-feathered or buff bird, and that's to a Spangleback hen again. But obviously that's a yellow Spangleback hen.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. And you were saying before, Richard, that they're quite free breeding.
Yeah, they're very keen to breed, which is a godsend when I've had most varieties over the years, and I think they're as easy as any.
Right.
As easy as any. I think this year I used 8 hens, and I had 67 young birds.
Wow.
20 of those were gone as feeders because they were straightforward. They molted out to remain selfs in cinnamon, green, blue and fawn. Didn't change at all, so they went. If I only had a few birds, I'd have probably kept some of them.
Yeah.
But as the birds expand, you've got more to choose from.
Yeah.
You select that way. So yeah, I probably only used 3 or 4 cocks, because I simply didn't have cocks that were good enough. I had other cock birds, but I didn't think there's any point in breeding birds that aren't going to improve what I've already got.
No.
So some of them had to nip around quite a few cages. But I say we had enough success to give me a much broader range, and to allow 1 or 2 people to have birds to expand the people breeding.
Yeah, no, super. And when you talk about sort of plans for 2022, I know it's still very much in the well, probably mid to late stages of planning. Do you have an idea, a view of the number of pairs or birds that you'll keep? So you'll move from 8 hens, will you, to?
I hope to. I've had a rough count. In fact, you might notice there's blue pegs on some cages. And that's the blue pegs are pinned on confirmed cocks, because the one difference between these 5s, they don't give themselves away quite as I have to. And I kept, a couple of years ago, I kept some pairs back to Stuart Fox. He couldn't come because of lockdown to collect the birds, and it's a good job he didn't, because all 4 were hens.
Right.
I was convinced 2 were cocks, but they were not.
Yeah. So they're not afraid to change sex then?
No, well, they just don't seem to sing quite so freely. As Fifes, you know as well as I do, Matt, when Fifes have virtually finished molt, you can pick out the cocks as easy as that.
Yeah.
And you'll get the odd one wrong, as I do. But these are not quite so... they don't give it away quite so freely. You have to sit here quietly and wait for them, turn the radio up high and wait for them to sing. So I'm hoping there may be anything up to 16 hens this year. We'll see how it goes. If I don't have enough good hens, I won't use them.
Yeah.
If I've got birds, I've got a few here yet that I may not use at all. But at the moment they're here for the security of knowing that I've got the depth of the squad if I need to pick a few out.
Yeah.
But hopefully something like that. But if I can make up good pairs, I'll pair them. I'd rather use them as pairs this year.
Yeah.
Because as you know, I've changed all the cages, and I must say, great thanks to David Rand, because I've found that I can clean out all these cages in 30% of the time, but I can clean out all the old ones, and that's a great thing. So I'm really pleased with that, because that's a big time saving.
So Richard, you've mentioned the cages and their time saving nature for you. It's It's a lovely long old room, this, isn't it?
Well, yeah, this didn't start like this. In fact, that door was in the middle of the building when I had it put up, and then I thought, we don't have enough space here, so those things actually go on the end.
Like every great birdman, we're going to need a bigger shed.
Well, that's true, and obviously by adapting it to put a flight on the end, we're able to put young birds in there. Once they're weaned and feeding well, they can move into there, which keeps plenty of space.
Yeah.
But basically, yeah, the benefits of changing the cages I should have done years ago. I didn't even realise it when the cages were done. They look very nice, but the biggest saving is cleaning out time. It's 30% of the time it used to take me to do 76 cages. To do these, it's just saves so much time because that isn't the most enjoyable part of the hobby.
No. We'd much rather be looking at the birds and musing over our pairings for the following year than cleaning cages out, wouldn't we?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And the other great thing about plastic cages is mite.
Yeah.
I don't get any mite now, and I haven't for quite a few years, and it's mostly down to my old friend Jack Nicholson. Because when Jack moved house from locally up to the Cleveland, he asked for some mug to look after his birds for a few weeks. Well, I was that mug. No, I was happy to do it, but Jack took several months to get to get settled in a new home. But the advice he gave me was front line on your birds, and since then I've never had mite. I think that's, you can't breed canaries and mite.
No, it's one or the other.
Yeah, that's absolutely one or the other. You won't breed both, and if you don't prevent mite, because you can't save birds once there's mite in the nest. The chicks are already going to die because they've had their blood sucked, they lose colour, and you know you've already lost them. So it's prevention, and that alone is. Who are you singing? And there's another one. Yeah.
There's another blue peg coming out, everybody.
Another blue peg, yeah.
Did you get the cage?
Another cockbird, yeah. Down the bottom there. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's a vital point. Another thing I'd like to say about housing and birds and cages and everything else, it's not imperative to have lovely cages or a lovely bird room. I've seen some bird rooms I could go and live in, but you can breed birds in any old cage as long as you make sure there's no mite there. You don't have to start in the hobby with fantastic stuff. In fact, when I was a kid, I think we had some tea chests that we kept canaries in and bred them successfully. It's nice to have nice cages, but it's not imperative. You don't have to spend a fortune to come into the hobby.
No, and I think that's really important advice, Rich, isn't it? Because I think sometimes you can see, and I know with the canary room, we go to some fantastic setups, and people look at them and think, oh my God,
I can't compete.
Yeah, I can't do that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, my first bird room used to be an old outside loo.
Yep.
In between a terrace house in between the back wall and the kitchen, and I knocked it down, put a wooden front on it and a wooden top, and it was, I think, 5 foot by 7 foot, and I had 40 odd cages in there and bred some really nice fifes. So
precisely that. I think mine was an outside coal shed, and my parents had gas central heating put in. So there it was, an empty building. All I had to do is take the door off and have some light into the building, and we did that. We bred birds in there, no problem. So it's not important if you can get some old double breeders, give them a good scrub down with some bleach and whatever, and you only need a pair or two. If you've got the right birds, you can compete, certainly with novices, and I would urge anyone who's thinking of doing it to get involved, because you don't need a fabulous bird place.
No.
I also think to some extent, the birds are the same as they were 60 years ago, when there was no medicine for this, no medicine for that. Now there is a myriad of things, and people are being told as novices, oh, you must have this, you must have that, you've got to have this supplement and that supplement. Your birds need the bath, Your birds need green. They need to be fed and kept clean. But you don't have to spend a fortune. If you don't have a fortune, don't do it. I don't have a sick bird, but there's nothing special going on in here.
Yeah.
It's just looking after them and being observant.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? I think we all get, and I'm certainly guilty of that, getting carried away. You know, I've got a proper little menagerie of medicine cupboards and things, and I think, you know, we tinker and tinker and tinker, but in reality, you know, I'm not a scientist. I don't actually know whether it's doing any good or not. So I think the kind of key, as you say, is to keep it simple.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that's the case. I think too much money is spent on things that aren't necessarily, you know, get the baths on the cages, you know, get green food for the birds, keep them active. I think that, and keep them clean. But you don't have to spend a fortune, particularly if you don't have a fortune. No. You know, it is a hobby you can be part of, spending a minimum amount of money.
Yeah.
Right, while we're here, I'd just like to present you with a little present from the London Fancy Club.
What's this?
You really don't know about it, do you?
What's this? No, I've got no idea. Oh my word.
This is your very own London Fancy mug, so you can drink your coffee out of that, your black coffee out of that.
Oh, fantastic.
And a badge to put on your lapel for the London Fancy.
Oh.
And you asked me what the requirements are of the London Fancy. Well, you can do your own studying now, that, because it's all here for you.
Oh, wow.
And so at least when you get involved talking to other people, you can give them a little bit of what's required.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, fantastic. I'm very rarely lost for words, but actually at this moment I am. Richard, thank you so much. We've got a new cuppa, everyone, a new cuppa. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for thank you for all the work you've done. I guess on behalf of the Fancy, Richard, if it wasn't for people like you, we wouldn't see birds like this. So on behalf of everybody who loves canaries, our thanks for putting a good 5 years of your life into bringing these birds back. Thank you for your hospitality today, and I'm delighted with those things, mate.
Good.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. Our thanks to Richard Knowles. Our thanks to the London Fancy. We'll keep an eye on them. As we go forward.
Stafford next year. Come and have a look at the birds at Stafford.
Yeah.
Hopefully there'll be more.
Yeah. Let's hope so. Until next time, everyone. Take care.